So a fire ant raft is what happens when a fire ant nest gets inundated by floodwater. If the rise of the water is slow enough, the ants will mound up and move out of the nest. They'll form into a rafting state by clinging onto each other, and they will start floating out on that water. If you do encounter a rafting fire ant colony, the best thing to do is to take a photo and report it through our online reporting portal through fireants.org.au. Please don't interact with the fire ant colony in a rafting state. They're actually a lot more aggressive and they're a lot more toxic. This is because they're in ultimate defence mode, so their instinct, if they meet a solid material, is to swarm it and sting as they go. So please act in your own safety, take a photo, send it through, and don't interact with the fire ant nest directly. Fire ants washing up onto beaches, it could occur if there's been localised movement near the mouth of a river. In that situation, fire ants could end up on the beaches. It's less likely that they would survive out in the open water, so the further that they would move into a saltwater situation, the less likely they would be to survive. Everyone knows the longer they spend at the beach, the more puckered they get because there's not enough water, so fire ants will start to desiccate in the saltwater situation. Fire ants are known to inhabit the high tide area on beaches, so they can actually spread to beach situations via flight, which is probably the greatest spread risk. The area where they do colonise on beach fronts is at the high tide line, so there's a nice exchange of nutrients for them to survive on. It can be quite a complex situation. In terms of treatment, treatment is dictated by the situation. So depending on whether it's close to water that the nest is found, what the tide is like, and what the restrictions on our permits and product labels are, all of the treatment will be dictated in alignment with the environmental safety directions on the products. So there's a few problems of fire ants colonising beaches. Obviously, humans going onto beaches for picnics and any beach activities could be an issue if we've got fire ant nests active in that zone. There's also a risk to the dune communities. Dune communities are necessary for our beachfront environment, so fire ants getting in there can affect the local wildlife, affect the way that the dunes are built, and it makes it very difficult to treat because you don't want to interact with the dunes as much as possible. In terms of other species impacts, I always think of the turtle hatchery up at Monrepo. If fire ants got into that situation, it would be quite devastating to some major endangered turtle species. So fire ants on the beach is very much less than ideal. So fire ant survival in floods is interesting. They are built for flooded environments. They come from an ephemeral wetland that does flood seasonally. Their survival depends on the type of flood event that happens. So if you've got sustained rain over a period of time and the flooding is slow, the fire ants will mound up and they will start to raft. If you've got a deluge and the flooding happens very quickly, like a flash flood scenario, it's more likely that the fire ants will actually hunker down inside the colony. They will take advantage of the air pockets that are trapped inside the colony structure, and they will be able to survive there for a couple of days at a time. For longer events of inundation, they are known to enter stasis so that they drop their metabolism and they don't actually need to eat or breathe too frequently, and they can survive for quite an extended period of time. So fire ant rafting is only known to be quite short distance. It all depends on the turbulence of the water in the river system. Usually when the fire ants reach a slower part of the river system, that's where they'll unload. Rafting into northern New South Wales, for example, there's a very, very slim chance of that happening, and the reason for that is that all of the major tributaries and streams in southeast Queensland actually flow back into the already infested area. So the likelihood of spread outside of that zone via flooding is very, very slim. The greatest risk to cross-border movement at the moment is through natural flight or by human-assisted movement. So those are all factors that we take into consideration, including flooding, when we're looking at planning our surveillance to make sure that we are looking in the right spots and we're across all of the areas that fire ants may have spread to. So a lot of people ask how they can treat nests when they're in a rafting state. The best thing to do is to just let the nest be. The reason for that is when fire ants are in a rafting state, they're not foraging, so applying a granular treatment product is not going to be effective because they're not going to collect it and consume it. Additional to that, we don't want to be applying any of the granular products intentionally into a water body because it's just not going to be effective. In terms of using the chemical that we're using for injection, we're not going to apply that directly to a water body either because it's just not environmentally responsible. What we would do in that situation is wait until the nest had made landfall and set itself up. Then we would go in with the injection to make sure that it was done in the proper manner and according to all of the APVMA permits and product labels.